In the world of professional wrestling, there was one breed of wrestler that stood apart from the rest, the powerhouses. These weren't just wrestlers, they were forces of nature, men who could devastate opponents with raw, unbridled strength. But in the squared circle, power isn't everything. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on three of the most devastating powerhouses the WWF ever unleashed. Each one was destined for greatness, but fate had other plans. What really happened to these titans of the ring? The answer might shock you. Jim Neidhart was one of wrestling's most intense characters, whose menacing laugh and powerhouse style made him the perfect tag team partner for Bret the Hitman Hart. He went from being a record-breaking shot-put athlete to becoming one of WWE's most memorable big men, throwing opponents around like ragdolls while rocking his iconic pink and black attire. However, in 2018, the anvil would fall and never rise again. James Henry Neidhart was born on February 8, 1955 in Montebello, California. The first signs of his special talent showed up on his high school track field. Picture a young Jim walking up to throw the shot put with everyone watching quietly. What he did that day was amazing. He threw the shot put so far that he broke the California state record. His throw was so good that no one could beat it for 12 whole years at Newport Harbor High School. This wasn't just luck. Jim had the kind of raw strength that would make him famous later in life. But Jim's athletic ambitions initially led him down a different path. With his impressive strength and natural athleticism, the NFL came calling. In 1978, he found himself wearing the silver and black of the Oakland Raiders, a team known for taking chances on unique talents. When that door closed, another opened with the Dallas Cowboys. The football dream seemed within reach, but fate had other plans. Sometimes the most important moments in life come disguised as disappointments. While Jim's NFL career didn't materialize as he hoped, his remarkable physical prowess caught the eye of someone who would change his life forever. Wrestling promoter Stu Hart, a legendary figure in professional wrestling, saw something special in this powerful young athlete. Hart had an uncanny ability to spot diamond in the rough talent, and in Jim, he saw unlimited potential waiting to be unleashed in the wrestling ring. Those early years of shot-put competitions and football training weren't wasted time. His explosive strength, developed through years of athletic training, would soon find a new home in the world of professional wrestling, where raw power met showmanship in perfect harmony. Inside a Calgary basement, a place that would change wrestling forever, future stars learned their craft through pain and sweat. They called it the Hart Dungeon, and it wasn't your average wrestling school. When Stu Hart invited Jim to train there, no one knew this basement would completely change his life's path. The dungeon was brutal, and everyone knew it. Under the Hart family's house, wrestlers learned the hard way. Through real holds and genuine fighting moves, people in the neighborhood could hear yelling from that basement, and soon Jim's voice joined the mix. But while others just tried to survive the training, Jim actually got better and stronger. Yet Jim found more than just wrestling skills in Calgary. Between the tough training sessions with Stu Hart, he caught the eye of Stu's daughter Ellie. They clicked right away. Ellie knew wrestling inside and out. She'd watched her dad train wrestlers her whole life. They fell in love while Jim learned wrestling moves, their story playing out in the most unlikely of places. Their wedding in 1979 wasn't just about love. It joined Jim to wrestling's royal family. The strong guy from California was now part of the Hart clan, a family that had shaped wrestling for years and would keep doing so for many more. But getting married to Ellie would lead to something even bigger in Jim's wrestling career. Joining the Hart family opened doors Jim never expected. As he got better at wrestling and grew closer to the Harts, something big was brewing. A partnership that would shake up wrestling was just around the corner. Jim didn't know it yet, but his biggest moment in wrestling was coming, and it would change everything. At the legendary Calgary Stampede, Stu Hart saw a chance to turn his son-in-law into something special. The yearly festival wasn't just about cowboys and rides, it featured unique contests that celebrated raw strength. Among them was the anvil toss, a challenge that would change Jim's wrestling identity forever. Stu pulled Jim aside with an offer that showed just how clever he was at building stars. $500 waited for Jim if he could not only compete in, but win the anvil toss. In the 1970s, that kind of money turned heads. But more importantly, Stu knew a victory here would give Jim something priceless, a character that fans would never forget. The day of the competition arrived with the summer sun beating down on the Stampede grounds. As Jim stepped up to throw, the crowd grew quiet. The anvil, weighing more than most men could lift, sat waiting. In a display of pure power that left spectators slack-jawed, Jim launched the massive piece of metal an incredible 11 feet 2 inches through the air. The victory did more than just pad Jim's wallet. It gave birth to a wrestling identity that would stick with him for life. The Animal, his previous nickname, didn't quite capture what fans had just witnessed, but the Anvil, that told the whole story. It painted a picture of raw strength, blue-collar toughness, and the kind of power that could make even a seasoned strongman step back in awe. Stu's gamble paid off brilliantly. In one afternoon, Jim wasn't just another wrestler anymore, he was the Anvil, a name that would echo through wrestling arenas for years to come. The nickname fit him perfectly, capturing both his incredible strength and his connection to the hardy spirit of Calgary, a city built on grit and determination. In 1985, wrestling's landscape was changing fast, and one man stood at the center of it all: Vince McMahon. His World Wrestling Federation wasn't content staying regional anymore. Like a hungry shark, McMahon was swimming into new territories, gobbling up talent wherever he found it, and his eyes had locked onto two promising stars in Calgary. Jim and Bret Hart might have seemed like an odd match at first glance. One was a powerhouse who could toss anvils for fun, the other a technical master who could tie opponents in knots. But sometimes the best combinations are the ones that don't make sense on paper. McMahon saw something special in this unlikely duo, a perfect blend of power and precision that could revolutionize tag team wrestling. Enter Jimmy Hart, the megaphone-wielding manager known as the Mouth of the South. His addition to the mix was like throwing gasoline on an already hot fire. The decision to put him with Bret and Jim wasn't just smart, it was genius. Here was a mouthpiece who could rile up crowds while two of wrestling's finest talents did what they did best in the ring. The Hart Foundation wasn't just another tag team, they were a statement. In their pink and black gear, they stood out immediately. Jim's raw power complemented Bret's technical wizardry like peanut butter and jelly, creating a combination that would write their names in wrestling's history books. Looking back, it's clear that 1985 wasn't just another year in Jim's career. It was the moment everything changed. The Hart Foundation would go on to become one of wrestling's most decorated and remembered tag teams, proving that sometimes the best decisions in wrestling aren't just about individual talent, but about finding the perfect chemistry between partners. Inside the WWF's squared circle, something special was brewing. The Hart Foundation wasn't just another tag team, they were revolutionizing how tag team wrestling looked. When Bret Hart moved like a surgeon in the ring, carefully taking apart his opponents, Jim was there to shake the ropes and send them flying with explosive power. It was like watching a chess master team up with a wrecking ball. Their matches against the British Bulldogs wrote a new chapter in wrestling history. Davey Boy Smith and the Dynamite Kid weren't just opponents, they were the perfect rivals. All four men knew each other from the Hart Dungeon days, and it showed in the ring. These weren't just matches, they were violent ballet performances that left crowds breathless. Every lockup told a story, every counter-move had meaning, and when these teams clashed, magic happened. February 7th, 1987, that's when everything changed. On an episode of Superstars of Wrestling, the Hart Foundation finally struck gold. The night they took the tag team titles from the British Bulldogs wasn't just a victory, it was a coronation. The pink and black attack had arrived at the top of the mountain, and they weren't planning to leave anytime soon. For nearly a year, they dominated the tag team scene. The Killer Bees brought their quick strikes and double-team moves, but the Foundation had an answer. The young stallions charged in with youthful energy, only to be taught harsh lessons by the champions. Strikeforce thought they had the formula figured out, but Bret and Jim proved them wrong time and again. Each successful defense added new wrinkles to their game. Bret would soften up opponents with his technical mastery, while Jim stalked the ring like a caged animal, waiting to unleash his power. Their opponents never knew which was worse, getting caught in Bret's sharpshooter or being on the receiving end of Jim's devastating power slam. This wasn't just a championship reign, it was a masterclass in tag team wrestling that teams would study for generations to come. When the summer heat of 1988 rolled in, wrestling fans witnessed a clash of titans that shook the ring posts. Demolition wasn't just any tag team, they were walking wrecking machines in face paint and spikes. When they locked up with the Hart Foundation at SummerSlam, the ring could barely contain the explosion of power. Jim, refusing to back down, went chest to chest with axe and smash, proving he could throw down with wrestling's most feared powerhouses. But it was their battles with the Rockers that showed wrestling fans something they didn't expect. Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty moved like lightning and flew through the air like they had wings. Most big men would have been left in the dust, but Jim showed he had more tricks up his sleeve than anyone knew. The Anvil, all 280 pounds of him, adapted his style on the fly. He'd catch the Rockers mid-flight, turn their own momentum against them, yet still keep up with their fast-paced attack. These matches across 89 and 90 weren't just great wrestling, they were proof that Jim was something special. While other power wrestlers stuck to their usual playbook, Jim showed he could wrestle any style thrown at him. One night he'd be trading power moves with giants, the next he'd be catching high flyers and matching speed with wrestling's quickest stars. In the ring with the Rockers, Jim revealed layers to his wrestling that nobody saw coming. He didn't just rely on raw strength anymore, he showed timing, agility, and ring smarts that surprised everyone. When Michaels or Jannetty came flying off the top rope, the Anvil was ready with perfect positioning and split-second timing. These weren't just matches, they were showcases of how a true ring veteran could evolve and adapt. Through these feuds, the Anvil proved what old-school wrestling fans had always known. Size and power were just part of his arsenal. Whether it was surviving Demolition's assault or keeping pace with the Rockers' high-speed attacks, Jim showed that a true wrestling great could do it all. His ability to adapt while staying true to his power-based core made these matches classics that fans still talk about today. The wrestling world sizzled as the Hart Foundation's war with Jimmy Hart's crew reached fever pitch. Their old manager had become their worst enemy, and every match felt personal. At the '89 Royal Rumble, they found an unlikely partner in Jim Duggan, the patriotic powerhouse whose voice echoed through arenas. Together, they faced off against the ruthless combo of Dino Bravo and the Rougeau brothers in a match that had fans on their feet. 2 out of 3 Falls matches were wrestling's ultimate test of endurance and skill. It wasn't enough to get 1 pin. You needed 2. When the dust settled, the Hart Foundation and Duggan stood tall, proving that sometimes the good guys do win. The victory sent a message. The pink and black attack wasn't just surviving, they were thriving. WrestleMania 5 brought another challenge, the Honky Tonk Man and Greg Valentine. This wasn't just any match, this was wrestling's biggest stage. The Hart Foundation rose to the occasion, adding another win to their impressive record. But behind the scenes, changes were brewing. Both Brett and Jim were starting to eye something new, singles glory. House shows became testing grounds for both men's solo careers. While fans knew them as tag team specialists, these matches showed different sides of both wrestlers. Jim, in particular, caught everyone's attention. The Anvil wasn't content with just tag team success, he wanted more. His eyes locked onto Rick Rude's Intercontinental Championship, and suddenly, the powerhouse who'd made his name throwing anvils was hunting for singles gold. The matches against Rude showed a different side of Jim. The Ravishing One was known for his technical skill and ring psychology, forcing the Anvil to dig deep into his wrestling toolbox. These weren't just matches, they were proof that Jim could hang with the best singles competitors in the business. Every near fall and close call had fans believing the Anvil might just capture gold on his own. Los Angeles Sports Arena, WrestleMania 7, 1991. Wrestling's biggest night was about to turn ugly. A year earlier, the Hart Foundation had steamrolled the Bolsheviks in record time. But tonight they faced something different, the street-tough Nasty Boys, a team that didn't just bend the rules, they broke them with a smile. The match was like watching a car crash in slow motion. The Nasty Boys brought their garbage can style of wrestling, turning the ring into a war zone. Knobs and Sags weren't interested in technical wrestling, they wanted to hurt people. The Hart Foundation tried to keep it clean, showcasing their signature moves and teamwork, but sometimes nice guys finish last. When Jerry Sags pulled out that motorcycle helmet, everything changed. The referee was distracted, focusing on the wrong corner at exactly the wrong moment. The crack of metal on flesh echoed through the arena as the helmet connected with Jim's skull. The Anvil, for all his power and toughness, couldn't overcome physics and steel. He dropped like a stone. Brian Knobs, grinning like a kid who'd just gotten away with stealing cookies, made the cover. The referee's hand hit the mat 3 times, and just like that, the Hart Foundation's reign was over. The Nasty Boys celebrated like they'd won clean, but everyone knew better. That motorcycle helmet had written a new chapter in tag team history, even if it wasn't the ending most fans wanted. This wasn't just any title change, it marked the end of an era. The Hart Foundation had carried the tag team division with class and skill. Now the belts sat around the waists of 2 brawlers who'd stolen them with a foreign object. Wrestling could be cruel that way, but sometimes the dirtiest players drew the biggest cards. The Los Angeles crowd sat in shocked silence, watching as the Nasty Boys paraded around with their ill-gotten gains, while Jim and Hart were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered championship dreams. The early 90s didn't just mark the end of the Hart Foundation's championship runs, they cemented their place as pioneers who changed tag team wrestling forever. Like master artists who left their mark on every canvas they touched, Bret and Jim had painted a new picture of what tag team wrestling could be. Watch any Hart Foundation match, and you'd see the blueprint they created. It wasn't just about Bret's technical wizardry or Jim's raw power anymore, it was the way they wove these elements together. When Jim would catch a flying opponent and turn them into a power slam, it wasn't just a move, it was poetry in pink and black. The way Bret would soften up an opponent's leg before the anvil would come in to finish the job, that wasn't just strategy, it was storytelling that fans could feel in their bones. Those pink and black tights became more than just wrestling gear. In a world of neon colors and wild patterns, the Hart Foundation's look stood out by being sharp and professional. Every time they stepped through the curtain, they looked like they meant business. That image of professionalism and skill became their calling card, inspiring a whole generation of wrestlers to take their craft just as seriously. But perhaps their greatest gift to wrestling was their versatility. One night they could slug it out with powerhouses like Demolition. The next they could keep pace with high flyers like the Rockers. They proved that a great tag team didn't need to be one-dimensional. This adaptability set a new standard. To be the best, you had to be able to wrestle anyone, anywhere, any style. Years later, when fans would watch new tag teams rise through the ranks, they'd see pieces of the Hart Foundation's influence. Way teams worked together, timing of their moves, psychology of their matches, all of it carried echoes of what Bret Hart and Jim had built together. They hadn't just been champions, they'd been teachers, showing everyone who followed them what tag team wrestling could be. Inside the WWF's ever-changing landscape, Jim found himself at a crossroads after 1991. The Hart Foundation might have been done, but the anvil wasn't finished. When he joined forces with Owen Hart, Bret's high-flying younger brother, fans got excited. Here was a fresh take on a winning formula, the power of the anvil matched with Owen's incredible aerial skills. The new foundation hit the ground running with a fresh look and attitude, gone were the pink and black tights, replaced with a more colorful style that matched the early 90s vibe. But keeping up with teams like the Natural Disasters wasn't easy. Earthquake and Typhoon brought the kind of raw power that even Jim had to respect, leading to battles that shook rings across the country. The Beverly Brothers provided a different kind of challenge. Bo and Blake Beverly were technically sound and loved to bend the rules when refs weren't looking. New Foundation's matches with them showed flashes of brilliance, moments where it seemed like Owen and Jim might capture the same magic that made the original Hart Foundation special. But wrestling's a funny business, and sometimes things just don't click the way you hope. Despite Owen's incredible talent and Jim's proven track record, the new foundation never quite caught fire like its predecessor. Chemistry was there, the timing wasn't. When February 15th, 1992 rolled around, nobody knew they were watching the team's final match together. The new foundation's short run became one of wrestling's what-if stories. The pieces were all there. Owen's skill, Jim's power, their family connection, but sometimes even the most promising combinations need more than just talent to succeed. That final match marked not just the end of a team, but the close of another chapter in Jim's ever-evolving career in the squared circle. 1992 hit like a tornado backstage at WWF. When faced with a mandatory drug test, Jim made a choice that would change everything. The anvil, known for his explosive power in the ring, let that same intensity spill over behind the scenes. The image of a television monitor flying through the air became his unexpected farewell to the company that had made him famous. But wrestlers don't stay down for long. Jim hit the independent scene like a man with something to prove. Small towns, high school gyms, anywhere there was a ring, and fans who wanted to see the anvil in action. These weren't the big arenas he was used to, but they kept his skills sharp and his name alive in wrestling. 1993 brought new opportunities when WCW came calling. The company needed established stars, and Jim brought name value and real wrestling credentials. His matches with Sting showed he could hang with the best. The Stinger might have been WCW's franchise player. Jim gave him all he could handle, proving the anvil wasn't just a tag team specialist. The feud with Rick Rude felt personal, like unfinished business from their WWF days. These weren't tag matches anymore. There was nowhere to hide and nobody to tag. Just two veterans trading moves and telling stories in the ring. Jim showed that his power game worked just as well in singles competition, even against one of wrestling's most technically gifted performers. This chapter in WCW painted a different picture of the Anvil. Without the Hart Foundation name or the pink and black gear, he stood on his own. Every power slam and every victory was his alone, proving that while tag team wrestling made him famous, it wasn't the only thing he could do. The man who once tossed anvils for money was now throwing his weight around in a new territory, writing his own story one match at a time. Back in the WWF, 1994 brought a twist nobody saw coming. The Anvil wasn't just back, he was back with a grudge. When he sided with Owen Hart against Bret, fans couldn't believe it. The man who'd been Bret's partner and brother-in-law was now standing against him, smirking alongside the younger Hart brother in one of wrestling's most personal feuds. King of the Ring became the stage for family drama turned violent. In one corner stood Bret and his loyal ally, the British Bulldog. In the other, Owen and Jim, former friends turned bitter enemies. The match wasn't just about winning, it was about family pride and betrayal. Every move carried extra weight, every taunt cut deeper, because these men knew each other so well. The Anvil showed a nastier side that night. Gone was the lovable Powerhouse who dominated with Bret. In his place stood a meaner, more vicious version of Jim. He didn't just want to beat Bret, he wanted to hurt him. Each power move came with added spite, each taunt designed to get under the hitman's skin. Working as a heel against Bret brought out something new in Jim's performance. He knew all of Bret's moves, all his tendencies, and he used that knowledge against him. The same power game that had once backed up Bret's technical skills was now being used to tear him down. It wasn't just good wrestling, it was great storytelling. Wrestling runs on emotion, and this match had it in spades. The sight of Jim, once Bret's trusted partner, now trying to destroy him, added layers of drama that went beyond simple good guy versus bad guy. It proved the Anvil could play either side of the fence convincingly, making fans hate him just as easily as they'd once loved him. In 1997, wrestling caught fire in a way nobody expected. The Hart Foundation wasn't just back, they were different. Meaner, prouder. Standing tall with Canadian flags, they turned their backs on American fans while being heroes back home. Jim, once again alongside the Hart brothers, found himself in the middle of wrestling's hottest story. The crowd reactions were unlike anything before. In America, they were villains who dared to speak against the USA, but crossed the border into Canada, and they were national heroes. The Anvil and his partners didn't just get cheers in Canada, they got the kind of reception usually reserved for rock stars. Every appearance turned arenas into wild parties or riot scenes, depending on which side of the border they were on. July 6, 1997, Calgary. In your house, Canadian Stampede. The stars aligned for one perfect night. In the ring stood some of wrestling's biggest names. Stone Cold Steve Austin, already becoming a legend. Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man. The Legion of Doom, powerhouses who dominated for years. Goldust, one of wrestling's most unique characters. Against them, the Hart Foundation in their hometown. The Calgary crowd that night wasn't just hot, they were nuclear. Every move by Jim and his partners brought the house down. When the Anvil unleashed his power moves, the building shook. This wasn't just another match. It was a celebration of everything the Hart Foundation stood for, everything they'd built over the years. Nobody knew it then, but this would be Jim's last dance on the big stage. If you're going to take your final bow on pay-per-view, doing it in Calgary, with family, in front of fans who treated you like royalty, that's the way to do it. The Hart Foundation's victory that night wasn't just a win. It was the perfect ending to a story that had started years ago in Stu Hart's basement, coming full circle in the city where it all began. The spotlight's glow can be hard to leave behind, but Jim, the years after his in-ring career, told a darker story than any wrestling match. When the roar of the crowd fades and the ring ropes stop bouncing, some wrestlers find the silence deafening. The Anvil was one of them. Wrestling isn't kind to bodies or minds. Years of taking bumps, throwing power slams, and living life on the road had left their mark. The physical toll was only part of the story. Like many athletes, Jim struggled to find his place in a world that no longer revolved around match times and arena schedules. The rush of performing in front of thousands isn't easy to replace. September 6, 2010 wasn't just another date on the calendar, it became a stark reminder of how far a star could fall. The charges read like a prosecutor's worst-case scenario: drug possession with intent to distribute, trafficking, burglary, grand theft. The man who once tossed anvils for sport and held championship gold was now making headlines for all the wrong reasons. The arrest painted a picture no wrestling fan wanted to see. Each charge told part of a larger story about addiction, struggle, and the desperate measures some take when the cheers stop and reality sets in. Controlled substances had replaced the adrenaline of competition. The man who once broke into matches with perfectly timed moves was now accused of breaking into buildings. This chapter of Jim's life served as a painful reminder of wrestling's darker side, how the business could lift someone to incredible heights but offer little guidance for the descent. The same intensity that made him a star in the ring was now working against him outside it, turning the Anvil's post-wrestling journey into a cautionary tale about fame's fleeting nature and the challenges of finding purpose after the final bell. The gas station incident stripped away the glamour of wrestling fame, revealing a man fighting battles far tougher than any ring match. The Anvil, who once stared down wrestling's toughest competitors, now couldn't look away from his own demons. When police arrived, he didn't find the calculated professional wrestler. He found someone lost in a haze of pills and confusion. His legendary strength now turned to desperate aggression. The courtroom in March 2012 painted a different picture than the arenas he once commanded. Instead of thousands cheering his power moves, he faced a judge's stern gaze. 6 months in jail wasn't part of any wrestling script, and his outbursts during sentencing only dug the hole deeper. Contempt charge was like watching a man who couldn't help but go for the countout loss. Yet in the darkness, a glimmer of his wrestling family's loyalty shone through. WWE, despite all the bridges that could have been burned, didn't turn its back on one of its own. They stepped up twice, funding rehabilitation programs to help their former champion find his way back. It wasn't just business, it was recognition that behind the character of the Anvil was a human being worth saving. Those rehab attempts told a different kind of wrestling story. Not one of good guys versus bad guys, but of a real man trying to pin his own demons to the mat. Each stint represented a kick-out at 2.5, a refusal to let addiction score the final fall. Company that had given him his greatest triumphs, now trying to help him achieve his most important victory over himself. In these moments, wrestling's scripted drama gave way to raw reality. A man who'd once tossed anvils for show is now trying to lift the weight of his own struggles. For fans who remembered his power and glory, these headlines hit harder than any finishing move, reminding everyone that sometimes life's toughest matches happen outside the ring. Inside a quiet Florida home in the early hours of August 13th, 2018, wrestling's final bell rang for the Anvil. The scene his wife Elizabeth described to TMZ wasn't the explosive power moves fans remembered. Instead, it was hauntingly gentle. A simple trip to adjust the thermostat turned into wrestling's last unexpected twist. That odd dance-like movement Elizabeth saw wasn't part of any ring performance. Jim, who'd been taking medication for seizures, moved in a way that made his wife's heart stop. He hit the wall and dropped to the floor. She didn't hesitate. 911 call was immediate. Sometimes even the fastest responses aren't fast enough. The 4-inch gash they found told the cruel story of his final moments. The man who'd survived countless battles in the ring, been thrown around by wrestling's toughest competitors, taken down by a simple fall. At 63, the Anvil's strength couldn't save him from this last opponent. The revelation about early-stage Alzheimer's cast a shadow over even his final days. The disease that steals memories had been lurking, threatening to rob him of the very stories that made him a legend. County sheriffs ruled out foul play. That didn't make the loss any easier. Jim, father, husband, wrestler legend, had left the ring for the last time. No more anvil tosses, no more power slams, no more of that distinctive laugh that echoed through arenas. Just memories, frozen in time like photographs of a man who lived life as big as his in-ring presence. Heart legacy runs like a bright thread through wrestling's tapestry. Nowhere is it more visible than in Natalya's ring work. Every time she steps between the ropes, echoes of the Anvil live on. Same power game, those technical skills, even the way she carries herself. It's pure Hart dynasty, pure Jim spirit. Watch Natalya wrestle and you'll catch glimpses of her father. When she locks in the sharpshooter, she's not just using her Uncle Brett's move. She's honoring a family tradition that Jim helped build. The pink and black gear isn't just a fashion choice, it's a living tribute to the Hart Foundation's glory days. And her dad and uncle changed tag team wrestling forever. But it goes deeper than moves and colors. Natalya brings that same blend of power and precision that made her father special. She can throw opponents around the ring with anvil-like strength, then switch to technical wrestling that would make the Hart Dungeon proud. Like watching wrestling history evolve in real time, next generation Jim adding new chapters to the family story. In WWE's women's division, Natalya stands out not just for her skill, but her connection to wrestling royalty. Every time announcers mention her father or the Hart Foundation, keeping the Anvil's memory alive. struggles later in life don't diminish what he built. They just make the story more human, more real. Through Natalya, Jim's influence on wrestling never really ended, it just transformed. The powerhouse who once tossed anvils for sport lives on through his daughter's power slams. The proud Heart Foundation member's spirit shows in every pink and black outfit she wears. The legacy of the anvil didn't end on that August morning in 2018. It just found a new way to shine in the squared circle. Through the lens of cold statistics, Jim's career looks impressive enough. Those tag team titles, those headlining matches spanning decades. But wrestling isn't about numbers. It's about moments that stick in fans' memories, and the anvil created plenty of those. That laugh, you can still hear it if you close your eyes. It wasn't just a character trait, it was Jim's exclamation point on every promo, every victory, every moment of triumph. In a business full of larger-than-life characters, he managed to stand out without needing fancy gimmicks. Just raw power, natural charisma, and that unforgettable laugh. Think back to WrestleMania 6, when victory came calling, or those legendary Heart Foundation matches rewrote what tag team wrestling could be. Each power slam, each devastating move told the story of a man who'd gone from tossing anvils at the Calgary Stampede to tossing opponents in wrestling's biggest venues. Jim's story isn't just about wrestling glory, it's about human struggle too. When the spotlight dims and the crowds go home, when the roar of thousands turns to silence, that's when some of life's toughest matches begin. His battles outside the ring remind us that even our heroes fight private wars we never see. From the Heart Dungeon to WWE stardom, from triumph to tragedy, Anvil's journey mirrors wrestling itself. Spectacular, dramatic, sometimes glorious, sometimes heartbreaking. His daughter Natalya carries his legacy forward now, proof that the stories we write in the ring can echo long after we're gone. Next up, British Bulldog.
The British Bulldog was one of the most athletic powerhouses in wrestling. He went from being a young prodigy in England to becoming WWE's proud European hero, creating an unforgettable moment when he defeated Bret Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. At a time when bigger meant better, Davey Boy Smith pushed his body to dangerous limits, building his superhuman physique through whatever means necessary. And in 2002, at just 39 years old, the Bulldog's heart would give out from years of abuse. In 1962, David Smith was born in a working-class corner of Lancashire, England. He would transform from a boy watching wrestling on his family's modest television set into one of Britain's most formidable ring warriors, though the path there wasn't what most fans believe. Growing up in Goulburn, Lancashire, where luxury was scarce but dreams were abundant, young David found his escape in the electrifying world of professional wrestling. Huddled around the television with his siblings Terrence, Joanne, and Tracy, he'd watch in awe as larger-than-life characters like Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks battled their opponents. These moments planted the seeds of his future, though none could have predicted just how far they'd grow. At just 15 years old, Smith's passion couldn't be contained any longer. He stepped into the training ring, where something remarkable became immediately apparent. This teenager possessed an almost supernatural aptitude for the sport. His raw talent was so impressive that it caught the attention of producers at ITV's World of Sport, Britain's premier wrestling showcase. In an era when breaking into television, wrestling was about as likely as winning the lottery, Smith had done it before he could even legally drive. A young star was rising in British wrestling, and all eyes were on the prodigy from Lancashire. Smith's natural talent translated into an explosive presence both as a singles competitor and in tag team action. In the singles ranks, his ascent was meteoric, coming within a heartbeat of capturing the prestigious British Welterweight Championship while still a teenager. But it was his partnership with cousin Tom Billington that would change wrestling history. Billington, who carved out his own fearsome reputation as the Dynamite Kid, formed an alliance with Smith that caught the attention of a crucial visitor from across the Atlantic. Bruce Hart, son of legendary promoter Stu Hart, was scouring the UK for fresh talent when he witnessed the raw power and agility of these two British phenoms. The opportunity Hart presented was too tempting to ignore. A chance to wrestle for the renowned Stampede Wrestling promotion in Calgary, Canada. In an era when breaking into North American wrestling was the dream of every European grappler, Smith and Billington had their golden ticket. What they couldn't know was that this move would set them on a path to revolutionize tag team wrestling forever. The infamous Heart Dungeon awaited in Calgary, a proving ground that had forged some of wrestling's greatest talents through pain and perseverance. For Smith and Billington, their British Commonwealth citizenship opened the door to this temple of technical wrestling. But what happened inside would test their limits in ways they never imagined. Under the watchful eye of Stu Hart, a man whose reputation for turning wrestlers into legitimate tough guys was known worldwide, the two Brits endured daily torture sessions that would make ordinary men quit. The dungeon's concrete floor and low ceiling became their classroom, with every submission hold, every stretch, and every grunt of pain molding them into something far beyond their early promise. But it was what happened after their graduation from this brutal finishing school that truly set the stage for greatness. In a twist of fate that would elevate both men's careers, the cousins found themselves on opposite sides of the ring. Their feud captivated Calgary audiences, showcasing their newfound technical prowess and intensity. The program reached its climax when Smith emerged victorious, claiming the prestigious Stampede British Commonwealth Mid-Heavyweight Championship, a title that carried significant weight in the territory's hierarchy. The victory wasn't just about the gold around Smith's waist. It was proof that the dungeon's baptism by fire had transformed these raw talents into polished gems. Every submission learned under Stu's tutelage, every grueling training session, had contributed to creating wrestlers who could not only survive in the demanding world of professional wrestling, but thrive in it. A fateful tour to Japan would add another deadly dimension to Smith's arsenal, the hard-hitting strong style that would later become his signature. But it was the reformation of his partnership with the Dynamite Kid that would change wrestling history. Now calling themselves the British Bulldogs, they terrorized rings across 2 continents, leaving a trail of broken opponents and stolen shows in their wake. Their reputation grew so large it couldn't be contained in Canada or Japan. In 1984, as Vince McMahon was executing his master plan for national expansion, he knew he needed the most explosive talent available. The British Bulldogs were at the top of his list. When McMahon acquired Stampede Wrestling that same year, the Bulldogs signing with WWF wasn't just another contract. It was a statement of intent. Inside the squared circle, they were poetry in motion, a perfect fusion of styles that few teams could match. The Dynamite Kid was a human highlight reel, pioneering a high-flying style that defied gravity and logic in equal measure. Meanwhile, Davey Boy served as the team's powerhouse anchor, his raw strength and surprising agility creating a foundation that allowed his partner to take even greater risks. But while Smith's professional life soared, his personal life was blossoming in equally meaningful ways. Love had found him in the Hart family dynasty, leading to marriage with Diana Hart, Stu's daughter. Their union would produce 2 children, Harry and Georgia, adding new chapters to both the Hart and Smith wrestling legacies. This personal happiness seemed to fuel Smith's in-ring success, creating a period where everything in his life was clicking into place like perfectly executed moves in a championship match. The British Bulldogs weren't just another tag team in WWF's growing roster. They were revolutionaries who would help redefine what tag team wrestling could be, bringing a hybrid style that combined British technical wrestling, Japanese strong style, and North American showmanship in ways audiences had never seen before. Wrestling rings across America were about to witness a revolution in tag team action, starting with a deeply personal rivalry. The British Bulldogs locked horns with their former Stampede stablemates, the Hart Foundation, comprised of Jim the Anvil Neidhart and Smith's brother-in-law, Bret the Hitman Hart. Their matches became instant classics, proving that even on a roster stacked with larger-than-life figures like Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, and Andre the Giant, technical wrestling excellence could steal the spotlight. But it was their feud with Greg the Hammer Valentine and Brutus Beefcake that would write their names in wrestling history. At WrestleMania 2, in a match that showcased the Bulldogs' unique blend of power and innovation, they captured the WWF Tag Team Championships. What followed was a 9-month reign of dominance, where their combination of Dynamite's aerial assault and Davey Boy's raw power proved unbeatable against all challengers. Their championship story would come full circle in January 1987, when the Hart Foundation finally managed to dethrone them in a match that demonstrated just how far all four men had come since their Stampede days. Though no longer champions, the Bulldogs remained a force in the tag division, engaging in memorable programs with teams like the Islanders, the Rougeau brothers, and the imposing Demolition. During this period, the Bulldogs added an unexpected element to their presentation, a real-life English bulldog named Matilda. More than just a mascot, Matilda became an integral part of their character, drawing massive cheers from crowds and adding a unique dimension to their feuds. Some teams would target the beloved canine to get under the Bulldog's skin, leading to heated rivalries that transcended typical wrestling storylines. This era marked a perfect fusion of in-ring excellence and character work, as the Bulldogs proved that technical prowess and crowd connection weren't mutually exclusive. Their matches during this period would influence tag team wrestling for generations to come, setting a standard for what two talented performers could achieve when given the freedom to showcase their abilities. The Dream Team's time in WWF would come to an abrupt end in 1988, driven by escalating tensions between the volatile Dynamite Kid and the Rougeau brothers backstage. Despite Billington's growing reputation as a troublemaker, Smith's loyalty to his cousin led him to follow when they departed, taking their talents to All Japan Pro Wrestling and a resurgent Stampede Wrestling. For 2 years, the Bulldogs continued crafting mat classics across the Pacific, facing off against legendary teams like the Malenkos, the Nasty Boys, and the dynamic Japanese duo of Kenta Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi. Each match showcased why they were considered one of wrestling's most innovative partnerships, but beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Billington's personal demons were creating an increasingly toxic situation, poisoning not just their professional relationship, but their family bonds as well. The breaking point finally came when Smith made the difficult decision to forge his own path, securing the British Bulldog trademark for himself, a business move that would drive the final wedge between the cousins. October 1990 marked a pivotal moment in Smith's career as he returned to the WWF, now simply known as the British Bulldog. Gone was the tag team specialist. In his place stood a reimagined Powerhouse, ready to make his mark as a singles competitor. This transformation wasn't just a change in name or presentation. It was Smith's declaration of independence, stepping out of the shadow of both his cousin and their celebrated tag team legacy. The split would prove prophetic. While Smith was about to enter the most successful phase of his career, Billington's path would take a darker turn, illustrating how two men who once moved in perfect synchronization could end up on such drastically different trajectories. From his first singles match, the British Bulldog unleashed a new intensity in WWF, demolishing opponents like the Warlord, Haku, and even the technically superior Mr. Perfect. His combination of raw power and surprising agility quickly won over crowds, but nowhere was his popularity more explosive than in his native United Kingdom. As WWF's American attendance began to soften, they discovered a goldmine in British wrestling fans who had found their new hero. Capitalizing on this phenomenon, WWF ventured to British soil with groundbreaking shows like UK Rampage and Battle Royal at the Albert Hall. Each appearance by Smith felt like a homecoming, with his victory over the Berserker at Rampage and his triumph in the Albert Hall Battle Royal sending crowds into a frenzy. These successes were just a prelude to what would become one of wrestling's most memorable moments. In 1992, WWF made a historic decision. SummerSlam, Vince McMahon arranged for the British Bulldog to challenge his brother-in-law, Bret the Hitman Hart, for the prestigious Intercontinental Championship. The anticipation was electric. Wembley Stadium swelled with 80,000 passionate fans, the largest legitimate crowd WWF had ever drawn at that point. But this wasn't just about numbers. It was about a perfect storm of circumstances. A hometown hero, a family rivalry, a prestigious title, and the biggest stage British wrestling had ever seen. The match that would follow wouldn't just meet expectations, it would exceed them in ways nobody could have predicted. The tension between these brothers-in-law, both products of the Hart Dungeon, had been building for months. Each man knew the other's moves intimately, Hart with his technical precision, Bulldog with his explosive power. As they prepared to step through the curtain at Wembley, both men knew this wasn't just another match, it was a chance to make history. Behind the glittering lights of Wembley Stadium lurked a darker reality. In the days leading up to the biggest match of his career, Smith spiraled into a drug-fueled binge with Jim Neidhart that left him unable to remember the planned sequence of events. The demons that had haunted his former partner Dynamite Kid had found their way to Smith, whose own substance abuse issues were beginning to overshadow his incredible athletic gifts. But sometimes wrestling magic happens in spite of the circumstances. Bret Hart, ever the consummate professional, orchestrated a masterpiece that night. Like a wrestling puppet master, he guided Smith through what would become one of the greatest matches in WWF history. The electricity in Wembley Stadium reached fever pitch as the two brothers-in-law wove a tale of technical brilliance, power moves, and near falls that had 80,000 fans holding their breath with every count. When Smith finally secured the victory and the Intercontinental Championship, it seemed like a coronation, the moment a new superstar was born. The image of him celebrating with his sister Diana and a tearful Bret became an iconic moment in wrestling history. But sometimes the brightest flames burn fastest. Instead of launching Smith to superstardom, his championship reign fizzled. The same issues that had nearly derailed his Wembley performance continued to haunt him. By November, he would drop the title to a rising Shawn Michaels, but worse was to come. In a devastating turn of events, WWF was forced to release Smith after he was caught receiving shipments of human growth hormone in the mail, a scandal that threatened to end his career just as it was reaching new heights. The fall from Wembley's heights to unemployment was a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes could change in professional wrestling, especially when personal demons entered the ring alongside the athletes. Just as Smith hit rock bottom, a turn of events would force him to reinvent himself once again. In the midst of Vince McMahon's highly publicized steroid trial, WWF couldn't risk any further scandals, leaving their former champion to seek opportunities elsewhere. His journey would take him through the indies of Eastern Championship Wrestling and back to the familiar rings of All Japan before landing in World Championship Wrestling in 1993. In WCW, Smith found himself aligned with the franchise player Sting, a partnership that seemed to promise great things. His Powerhouse style matched up perfectly against monsters like Sid Vicious and Big Van Vader, with one match against the latter even appearing to crown Smith as the new WCW World Champion. But in classic wrestling politics fashion, a dusty finish, named after Booker Dusty Rhodes' tendency to reverse dramatic victories, saw the title stripped away as quickly as it had been won. Just as his career seemed to be stabilizing, Smith's personal life threw another curveball. A bar fight with someone allegedly making advances toward Diana proved to be the final straw for WCW management. Once again, the British Bulldog found himself without a major platform for his talents. His next stop would be a humbling return to his roots in the UK's All-Star Wrestling, trading holds with local talents like Jimmy Ocean and Drew McDonald, a far cry from the packed stadiums and World Championship matches of just months before. This period served as a stark reminder of wrestling's volatile nature, where success could be as fleeting as a 3-count. The same explosive power and charisma that had once electrified Wembley Stadium was now being displayed in small British venues, showing just how quickly fortunes could change in the unforgiving world of professional wrestling. In the summer of 1994, an unexpected olive branch from WWF gave Smith another chance at the big time. Making his return at SummerSlam, he appeared during the explosive steel cage match between the warring Hart brothers, Bret and Owen. The Hart family drama had reached a boiling point, and Smith made his allegiance clear, standing firmly beside his brother-in-law Bret. This reunion led to a series of hard-hitting tag team matches, with the Bulldog and Hitman facing off against the unlikely alliance of Owen Hart and Jim Neidhart. As the family feud cooled, Smith's ambitions turned toward wrestling's ultimate prize, the WWF Championship. After coming up short against Bob Backlund in late 1994, he set his sights on the 1995 Royal Rumble, seeing it as his ticket to WrestleMania's main event. The night proved to be both epic and heartbreaking for Smith. Entering at number 2, he demonstrated incredible endurance by lasting until the very end, only to have his dreams shattered when number 1 entrant Shawn Michaels eliminated him last. With his world title aspirations temporarily derailed, WWF Creative had a unique idea to keep Smith in the spotlight. They paired him with the All-American Lex Luger to form the Allied Powers, a team meant to symbolize the unity between Britain and America. The concept seemed promising on paper, two of wrestling's strongest powerhouses joining forces to dominate the tag team division. This new direction marked yet another reinvention for Smith, showing his adaptability in an ever-changing wrestling landscape. The Allied Powers represented more than just another tag team. It was an attempt to capitalize on both men's popularity in their respective home countries while giving them a fresh direction after their individual main event pursuits had stalled. In what should have been a dominant force, the Allied Powers never quite found their footing in WWF's tag team ranks. Their pay-per-view appearances were limited to a victory over the Blue Brothers at WrestleMania and a failed bid to capture the tag team championships from Owen Hart and Yokozuna at In Your House 2. The partnership crumbled when Luger abruptly departed for WCW, leaving Smith to navigate the waters alone once again. His singles career hit a series of frustrating roadblocks, falling short against Diesel at In Your House 4 and his brother-in-law Brett at In Your House 5. With momentum stalling, Smith made a shocking decision, aligning himself with Jim Cornette's stable alongside Owen Hart. While the group boasted imposing figures like Yokozuna and Vader, it was the partnership between Smith and Owen that truly shined, their natural chemistry and family connection creating tag team magic. Yet Smith's hunger for singles glory never dimmed. May 1996's In Your House. Beware of Dog saw him push Shawn Michaels to the limit in a WWF Championship match that ended in a controversial draw. The inconclusive finish led to a rematch at King of the Ring, the same historic night that gave birth to Austin 3:16. But even on this pivotal evening in wrestling history, Smith's quest for the company's top prize would end in disappointment. These setbacks painted a portrait of a wrestler who could consistently reach the summit but never quite plant his flag at the absolute peak. The British Bulldog's ability to seamlessly transition between singles and tag team excellence showed his versatility, but the ultimate prize remained frustratingly out of reach. Behind the scenes, a reality was settling in. While Vince McMahon viewed Smith as a reliable main event player, he didn't see him as the guy to carry the company's top prize. Rather than let this derail him, Smith channeled his energy into tag team excellence, reuniting with Owen Hart to capture the tag team championships from the Smoking Guns in a memorable victory. The duo proved themselves worthy champions, successfully defending against powerhouse teams like the Legion of Doom and the unlikely pairing of Vader and Mankind. But 1997 would finally see McMahon reward Smith's loyalty and consistency. In February, he and Owen delivered a technical masterpiece in the tournament finals, with Smith emerging as the first ever European champion, a title that seemed tailor-made for the British powerhouse. This triumph would lead to an even bigger opportunity when Bret Hart assembled a new version of the Hart Foundation. Bringing together Bret, Owen, Jim Neidhart, Brian Pillman, and Smith, the stable revolutionized wrestling storytelling through the Canada versus America angle. This unique narrative twist saw the group play heroes in Canada and Europe while serving as villains in the United States, a nuanced approach to wrestling psychology that was years ahead of its time. The reformed Hart Foundation became one of WWF's most compelling acts, with Smith playing a crucial role in their success. This period demonstrated wrestling's ability to blur the lines between good and evil, with audience reaction determined not by traditional face-heel dynamics, but by national pride and loyalty. The Bulldog's presence added international credibility to the stable, expanding its appeal beyond North American borders and helping create one of the most memorable storylines of the 1990s. As the Hart Foundation's popularity soared in Canada, Smith found himself riding a wave of success, successfully defending his European championship against legitimate tough guys like Ken Shamrock. However, a moment that should have been his crowning achievement turned bitter at the UK exclusive pay-per-view, One Night Only, on September 20th. In what was meant to be a touching tribute to his cancer-stricken sister Tracy at ringside, Smith was scheduled to retain his title against Shawn Michaels. But wrestling's behind-the-scenes politics would rear its ugly head. Michaels, wielding his considerable backstage influence, had the finish changed so he would emerge victorious instead. The decision left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Here was Smith, in his homeland, dedicating the match to his dying sister, only to have his moment stolen by backstage maneuvering. This incident only intensified the growing real-life animosity between HBK and the Hart family. The tension would reach its breaking point at the now infamous Survivor Series on November 9, 1997. The Montreal Screwjob didn't just change wrestling history, it shattered the Hart Foundation forever. Watching his brother-in-law Bret Hart get deceived in such a public manner, Smith made an immediate decision. Standing in solidarity with his family, he walked out of WWF alongside Bret and Jim Neidhart, making the jump to WCW. This exodus marked the end of an era. The Hart Foundation, one of wrestling's most compelling stables, was torn apart not by storyline betrayal, but by real-world business decisions. Smith's departure showed that sometimes blood and loyalty run thicker than business, even in the cutthroat world of professional wrestling. In 1998, Smith's once impressive physique had become a liability, his steroid use leaving him bloated and limited in the ring. His WCW run reflected this decline, relegated to undercard matches with Neidhart until a devastating accident in September changed everything. During a match, Smith took a brutal bump onto a concealed trapdoor, meant for Ultimate Warrior's dramatic entrance, that nobody had warned him about. The impact was catastrophic. What followed was a nightmare scenario that exposed wrestling's darker side. While Smith lay injured, Eric Bischoff fired him, believing he was exaggerating his condition. The reality was far more serious. Smith developed a spinal infection during recovery that nearly left him paralyzed. The physical pain drove him deeper into drug dependency, creating a vicious cycle that would follow him back to WWF in 1999. His return to WWF saw a stripped-down version of the British Bulldog. Gone were the iconic Union Jack tights, replaced by plain jeans. Even his signature Rule Britannia theme music was taken away. This repackaging, combined with his physical limitations and ongoing substance issues, left Smith a shadow of his former self. In an era defined by larger-than-life attitude-era personalities, he found himself losing to stars like The Rock before being demoted to the now devalued European Championship division. The transformation was jarring for longtime fans. The same wrestler who had once electrified Wembley Stadium was now struggling to keep up with the faster-paced style of the late 90s. His body, battered by years of abuse both in and out of the ring, simply couldn't deliver the power moves that had once made him special. This period served as a stark reminder of wrestling's physical toll and the dangerous spiral that could occur when injuries and addiction intersected. After years of setbacks, Smith managed one final moment of glory, capturing his old European Championship from D'Lo Brown on SmackDown in October 1999. But this victory was merely a brief flicker of his former brilliance. He drifted into the chaotic hardcore division, his once precise power moves replaced by brawling and weapon shots, until WWF was forced to release him in May 2000 after he arrived at an event clearly unfit to perform. As his professional life crumbled, his personal world shattered alongside it. His marriage to Diana Hart disintegrated amid shocking rumors of infidelity involving top WWF stars Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin. The divorce in 2000 marked the end of his connection to the legendary Hart family that had given him both his greatest triumphs and deepest sorrows. Hitting rock bottom forced Smith to confront his demons. He checked into an Atlanta rehabilitation clinic to battle his dependency on prescription painkillers, an addiction that had spiraled out of control following his 1998 back injury. A disturbing arrest for allegedly threatening Diana and her sister Ellie served as his wake-up call. With remarkable determination, Smith committed to getting clean, purging all medications from his system. Just as it seemed Smith had conquered his personal battles and was preparing for one last WWE run, tragedy struck. On May 18, 2002, while vacationing in British Columbia with his girlfriend, the British Bulldog suffered a fatal heart attack at just 39 years old. Though he had achieved sobriety, years of substance abuse had taken their toll. In 2020, WWE finally recognized his contributions with a Hall of Fame induction. In a touching moment that bridged generations, his son Harry brought Buffy, granddaughter of Smith's beloved mascot Matilda, to the ceremony.
Next up, Lex Luger.
Lex Luger was one of wrestling's most impressive physical specimens. WWE invested millions positioning Luger as the next Hulk Hogan, only for him to lose his championship dream at SummerSlam '93. But that failed moment was just the beginning of Luger's shocking story. How did the man once called the total package end up paralyzed in a hotel room, with his girlfriend dead and his legacy in ruins? In 1958, Lawrence Wendell Fole was born in Buffalo, New York. Before he became Lex Luger, he was just another college athlete with NFL dreams that were rapidly unraveling. It all started at Penn State, where Fole's athletic career showed promise. But it was at the University of Miami where things started getting complicated. The Hurricanes should have been his launching pad to professional football, but instead, one moment of rage changed everything. After a particularly frustrating game, Fole lost control in a hotel room outburst that got him immediately kicked off the team. This incident revealed the volatile personality that would both help and haunt him throughout his career. Despite this major setback, Fole's physical gifts were too impressive to ignore. Standing 6'4" with an Olympian physique, broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, chiseled abs, and arms that looked powerful enough to bend steel, he managed to bounce around professional football for a while. He had brief stints with several NFL teams, including the Miami Dolphins and Green Bay Packers, but mostly found himself watching from the sidelines. His USFL career with the Memphis Showboats and Tampa Bay Bandits showed slightly more promise, but football clearly wasn't working out. It was during this period of career limbo in Tampa when fate stepped in. Two wrestling stars, Hiro Matsuda and Barry Windham, spotted Fole at a local gym. Where football had failed to harness his raw athletic potential, wrestling seemed the perfect canvas for his gifts. Wrestling promoters had always had an eye for impressive physical specimens, and Fole fit the bill perfectly. "You've got the look," they told him. "Have you ever considered professional wrestling?" For a struggling athlete facing the end of his football dreams, this suggestion was a lifeline. Fole agreed to train under Matsuda, not fully understanding what he was getting himself into. Matsuda wasn't just any trainer. He was notorious for his brutal methods. This was the same man who had famously broken Hulk Hogan's leg during training to test his commitment to the business. If you trained with Matsuda, you were proving your toughness. The training was grueling. Hours of painful submission holds, endless cardio drills, and learning how to fall hundreds of times a day on unforgiving wrestling mats. Many would have quit, but Fole's determination, the same stubbornness that had gotten him into trouble before, now became his greatest asset. He endured the pain, absorbed the knowledge, and was forged in the fires of Matsuda's merciless training. In 1985, Lawrence Fole disappeared, and Lex Luger was born. Championship Wrestling from Florida became his training ground, where he worked his first matches and began developing his in-ring persona. The name Lex Luger was inspired by the comic book villain Lex Luthor, fitting for a man whose imposing presence naturally cast him as a heel, or bad guy, in the wrestling world. What made Luger stand out immediately was how quickly he adapted to the ring. Most athletes transitioning to wrestling look awkward for years, but Luger moved like he'd been born to do this. His combination of power moves, surprising agility, and natural charisma made promoters take notice right away. Eddie Graham, the legendary promoter running Championship Wrestling from Florida, saw dollar signs in Luger. He quickly moved him up the card, giving him matches against increasingly prominent opponents. Within months, Luger was already working with established stars and holding his own. By 1987, just 2 years after his debut, Luger accomplished something almost unheard of for such a newcomer. He defeated Nikita Koloff for the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship. This was the second most prestigious championship in the National Wrestling Alliance. For a wrestler with barely 2 years of experience, this was the equivalent of a rookie quarterback winning the Super Bowl MVP. The victory established Luger as more than a pretty face with muscles. He was now officially a force in professional wrestling, a legitimate star who could headline shows and draw crowds. Football washout to wrestling sensation in less than 3 years. But as Luger held that United States Championship, His career was about to transform completely when wrestling's most prestigious faction came calling. The Four Horsemen, led by the nature boy Ric Flair himself, had their eyes on the muscular phenomenon. This was wrestling royalty, the elite table that few ever got to sit at. In the NWA Jim Crockett Promotions landscape of 1987, the Four Horsemen represented the gold standard of wrestling excellence. Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and Tully Blanchard were masters of technical ability who made opponents look foolish with their precision while living the high life outside the ring. They weren't about flash or gimmicks. They were simply the best. What made the Horsemen decide to gamble on Luger? With just 2 years of experience, he was hardly the polished performer that defined the group's reputation. But what Luger lacked in technical expertise, he made up for with his imposing physique and undeniable star potential. The contrast was striking, like adding a sledgehammer to a set of surgical instruments. The elegant, technically brilliant Horseman recruited this physical specimen who relied primarily on power moves. Luger brought raw power that we simply didn't have before, Ric Flair would later reflect. He completed our arsenal. This created a fascinating dynamic within the group. Flair, Anderson, and Blanchard wrestled with precision and skill, while Luger brought intimidating presence. He was their muscle, their enforcer, a different flavor that complemented the group's established style. The benefits for Luger were immediate and substantial. Almost overnight, he went from promising rookie to sitting at the table with wrestling's elite. The mentorship he received behind the scenes proved invaluable. Every night, he watched masters of their craft work. Every ride between towns became a classroom where Flair, Anderson, and Blanchard shared wisdom about psychology, timing, and the business aspects of wrestling. These lessons accelerated Luger's development in ways that would have been impossible on his own. His confidence grew with each match, and his in-ring performances became more nuanced. He began incorporating subtleties he'd learned from his Horseman stablemates. Little things like proper timing, facial expressions that told a story, and understanding when to showcase power versus when to sell his opponent's offense. The association elevated Luger's status exponentially. Being a Horseman meant higher profile matches against top talent. Television time increased. His face appeared on more promotional materials. The rub from Flair, widely considered the greatest world champion of that era, gave Luger instant credibility. When fans saw him standing alongside these established stars, they naturally viewed him as belonging at that level. But success in wrestling rarely comes without complications. As Luger grew more comfortable in his role and gained popularity with fans, subtle tensions began brewing within the faction. The Horsemen had always been Flair's group. He was the unchallenged leader, the world heavyweight champion, the man fans paid to see. But now, Luger's impressive physique and improving skills were drawing attention and admiration, particularly from female fans. What started as friendly competition gradually evolved into something more complex. Luger's ambition became increasingly evident. He wanted more than just to be Flair's backup. He wanted to be the star. The United States Championship around his waist was prestigious, but the group's hierarchy was clear. Flair's World Heavyweight Championship was the crown jewel. The question became inevitable. Was Luger content being second in command, or did he have his eyes on Flair's position at the top? Wrestling promoters recognized the natural tension developing and began planting the seeds for what would become one of the most significant storylines in NWA history. The cracks in the Horsemen's unity became more apparent week by week. Small misunderstandings escalated into visible frustration. Flair's flamboyant personality and championship status meant he received the lion's share of attention, something that didn't sit well with the increasingly confident Luger. The breaking point came in dramatic fashion in 1988. During a championship cage match, the Horsemen turned on Luger in one of wrestling's most memorable betrayals. The attack transformed Luger overnight from villain to hero, as fans rallied behind the man who had stood up to the arrogant Horseman. No longer the muscle behind Flair, Luger emerged as a legitimate main event star in his own right, one with a ready-made rivalry against the most hated group in wrestling. The fans rallied behind Luger after his split from the Four Horsemen, but nobody could have predicted what would follow. Despite having everything a champion should possess, the size, the look, the fan support, Luger's career would become defined by something that defied logic, an uncanny ability to come up short when the world title was within his grasp. As 1988 rolled into 1989, Luger found himself in the spotlight as Ric Flair's primary challenger. Their rivalry electrified arenas, with the total package portrayed as the physical superior who could dethrone wrestling's nature boy. Match after match, Luger dominated physically, tossing Flair around like a rag doll, applying his devastating torture rack with precision, and whipping crowds into a frenzy as they chanted his name and pounded the railings in anticipation. But then, the pattern would emerge. A referee distraction, a missed opportunity, a sudden reversal. Somehow, Flair would escape with his title intact, leaving fans slumped in their seats in disbelief. "I thought this was finally it," one fan famously shouted after their Clash of the Champions match, where Luger had Flair beaten for a solid 3 count before the referee revealed he'd been knocked out of position. Behind the curtain, WCW bookers deliberately crafted Luger as the eternal challenger, someone powerful enough to seem like a threat but who would never quite reach the championship. This booking strategy kept ticket sales strong while preserving Flair's position atop the company, but it came with a personal cost. Backstage, Luger grew increasingly frustrated with his role as perpetual runner-up, reportedly confronting management about his career trajectory, while fans continued to invest in his seemingly endless chase. At first, fans accepted this as part of the storyline. After all, the pursuit is often more exciting than the victory itself. But as opportunities continued slipping through Luger's muscular fingers, audiences developed a peculiar relationship with his matches. "Here comes the screw job," fans would mutter to each other as Luger gained momentum. The Luger paradox took shape. A wrestling superstar with all the tools who couldn't seal the deal when championships were on the line. When Luger finally captured the WCW World Heavyweight Championship in 1991, the victory felt empty. His championship to the WWF. Luger wasn't defeating his longtime nemesis. He was filling a vacancy. Even during his championship celebration, fans held signs asking, "Where's Flair?" rather than celebrating the new champion. His lukewarm championship reign lasted just months before the title changed hands again. The company never fully committed to Luger, treating him as a transitional champion rather than their standard bearer. This reinforced the growing belief that despite his imposing physique, Luger wasn't true championship material. The disconnect fascinated wrestling observers. How could someone who looked so much like a champion consistently fail to be one? While Luger collected United States championships with ease, he struggled with the top prize. This created an invisible ceiling just above the secondary championship level, one that Luger could touch but never break through. Critics labeled him a choke artist, suggesting that despite his physical gifts, he lacked something essential that separates good wrestlers from great champions. This reputation was cemented during the infamous Lex Express campaign in WWF, when after months of promotion building toward a championship match against Yokozuna at SummerSlam 1993, Luger won only by countout. The WWF inexplicably staged a celebration with balloons and confetti for a wrestler who had technically lost. Confused fans watched as red, white, and blue streamers rained down, further damaging Luger's credibility. The pattern repeated so often it became impossible to ignore, creating a legacy that follows him today. The physical marvel who looked unbeatable but couldn't win when it mattered most. A cautionary tale in wrestling. Looking like a champion doesn't automatically make you one. By early 1992, Lex Luger found himself standing at a career crossroads. Despite his impressive physique and multiple championship runs in WCW, he sensed he had hit his ceiling. The endless cycle of almost but not quite winning the big one had left him frustrated. With backstage turmoil increasing in WCW and his career momentum stalling, Luger made the decision that would fundamentally alter his wrestling identity. He jumped ship to Vince McMahon's WWF. This transition came with a heavy price. Luger agreed to a full-year non-compete clause that completely sidelined him from wrestling during what should have been his prime years. The move represented more than a company change. It was a desperate gamble for career renewal after years of stagnation. McMahon planned to utilize Luger's impressive physique in his World Bodybuilding Federation while waiting out the wrestling restriction. But life had other plans. A devastating motorcycle accident in June 1992 derailed even this temporary solution, leaving Luger injured and without direction as the WBF itself collapsed shortly after. When Luger finally appeared on WWF television in early 1993, the transformation was jarring. The straightforward power athlete had a man utterly consumed by his own reflection. After waiting a year and investing millions to acquire this superstar, the WWF's grand vision was turning Luger into wrestling's embodiment of vanity. His entrance evolved into theatrical self-worship. Multiple full-length mirrors lined the entrance ramp like shrines to his ego, with Luger stopping at each one as if performing a ritual of self-adoration. He'd flex and admire himself with exaggerated expressions of pleasure, transforming what was once a simple walk to the ring into a spectacle of self-obsession. Each mirror became a stage where he performed not for the audience but for himself. This elaborate character was a complete reversal of his WCW persona. The total package had transformed into the total narcissist, shifting focus from in-ring dominance to superficial appearance. Even his entrance music featured the sound of shattering glass, broken mirrors symbolizing the destruction of his former self and the birth of this new, vain creation. The WWF matched Luger against technical masters like Mr. Perfect and Bret Hart. While these matches showcased his abilities as a heel performer, the audience response remained tepid. Despite quality in-ring work, something crucial was missing in the connection between Luger and the fans. This disconnect was particularly puzzling given the investment the company had made. The WWF was navigating troubled waters during this period. Hulk Hogan's departure had created a star power vacuum, and a steroid scandal had rocked the foundations of the business. Luger, despite his impressive credentials, seemed caught in the uncertainty of this transitional era. Behind the scenes, the company struggled to redefine itself. The steroid scandal placed Luger's physique-focused character in an awkward position, simultaneously an asset and a potential liability. The shifting landscape of professional wrestling worked against the very gimmick they had created for him. After just 6 months, the WWF abandoned the narcissist character entirely. The mirrors disappeared, the self-admiration routine vanished, and plans formed for yet another complete reinvention. This rapid pivot revealed the company's recognition of failure. Despite all the planning and investment, Luger's character had failed to connect with audiences. But this abandonment wasn't the end for Luger in the WWF. It was merely setting the stage for his most dramatic transformation yet, one that would push him toward the pinnacle of the company in ways nobody could have predicted. The transformation of Lex Luger from preening narcissist to all-American hero happened on a single, pivotal day that would alter the trajectory of his career. On July 4, 1993, as thousands of fans gathered aboard the USS Intrepid in New York Harbor, they witnessed something unprecedented: the manufacturing of patriotism in real time. The scene was meticulously choreographed. WWF champion Yokozuna, portrayed as a villainous foreign threat, had issued an open challenge to any American athlete brave enough to attempt to body slam his 500-pound frame. After several celebrities and athletes failed, Luger dramatically arrived via helicopter. The crowd roared as he stepped onto the deck in his Stars and Stripes t-shirt. Within moments, he accomplished what seemed impossible, hoisting Yokozuna's massive frame and slamming him to the mat as fans erupted in patriotic fervor. In that moment, the narcissistic villain was erased from existence. In his place stood America's new wrestling hero, custom-built to fill the patriotic void left by Hulk Hogan's departure. The transformation was instant, complete, and entirely manufactured. What followed was the most expensive promotional campaign for a single wrestler in the company's history. The WWF unveiled the Lex Express, a red, white, and blue tour bus emblazoned with Luger's image that would carry him across America on a patriotic crusade. This wasn't just a wrestling angle. It was a full-blown marketing blitz, attempting to create an instant American icon. The schedule crushed Luger physically and mentally. For 6 straight weeks, he endured marathon days, traveling upwards of 16 hours between cities. Shopping malls, media outlets, tourist attractions. The bus stopped everywhere. Autograph sessions blended into radio interviews, which melted into promotional appearances. The campaign tested his endurance more severely than any match could. But a strange disconnect emerged during this massive tour. Luger barely wrestled at all. While being positioned as the company's next great champion, he participated in remarkably few matches. His last actual match before SummerSlam was against Bret Hart on July 10th, followed only by a practice bout with Yokozuna on August 23rd. He had become a wrestling superstar who wasn't actually wrestling. The WWF's approach revealed their desperation to recreate the Hulk Hogan formula that had propelled the company to mainstream success in the 1980s. Luger now entered arenas to Stars and Stripes forever, wore American flag-themed ring gear, and posed with the same red and yellow color scheme that had been Hogan's trademark. The message couldn't have been clearer. Accept this new patriotic hero as Hogan's replacement. As SummerSlam 1993 approached, the hype reached fever pitch. Would this massive investment pay off? The WWF positioned the event as Luger's coronation, the moment when their new American hero would vanquish the foreign threat and capture wrestling's biggest prize. Then came the shocking decision that would haunt Luger's WWF career forever. After all the build-up, all the investment, all the manufactured patriotism, Luger defeated Yokozuna. By submission, by countout, meaning he won the match but ultimately failed. What happened next only amplified the bewilderment. Despite failing to capture the championship, Luger was showered with confetti and balloons in a celebratory scene typically reserved for new champions. Commentator Vince McMahon enthusiastically proclaimed Luger's victory, creating a surreal disconnect between what fans had witnessed and how it was being presented. "Look at the celebration. Lex Luger has conquered Yokozuna," McMahon exclaimed, while the reality was starkly different. Luger had received his one guaranteed title failure, a championship moment that never actually happened. The decision to have Luger win by countout was reportedly made to prolong the feud, but the damage was immediate and irreversible. The gap between the massive promotional investment and the underwhelming payoff created a credibility problem that Luger would never overcome with WWF audiences. Wrestling fans, even with their willingness to suspend disbelief, recognized the fundamental mistake in the storytelling. You don't spend millions of dollars, travel thousands of miles, and create months of nationwide hype only to deliver a technical victory with no championship change. The celebration of mediocrity undermined everything the Lex Express campaign had attempted to build. While the confetti from Luger's hollow victory was still being swept away, behind the scenes, a revolution was brewing. As the Lex Express campaign faded into memory, the wrestling industry was silently preparing for war. What if I told you that the man who couldn't deliver for the WWF would soon deliver the most devastating blow in the history of the Monday Night Wars? One surprise appearance, lasting less than 2 minutes, would transform Lex Luger from failed patriot to industry game-changer. By 1995, Luger's star had fallen dramatically in the WWF. The company that once sent him cross-country on a customized bus had relegated him to the tag team division, pairing him with the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith. No more pyrotechnics, no more American flags, no more championship opportunities. Just another mid-card talent filling out the roster. As his WWF contract neared its end, Luger did something unprecedented. He began secret negotiations with WCW while still actively competing for the WWF. On September 3, 1995, Lex Luger wrestled a house show match in New York, teaming with the British Bulldog against the Heavenly Bodies. Nothing special, nothing memorable. Luger simply collected his paycheck and vanished into the night, leaving no hint of what was about to unfold. Then came the moment that changed wrestling forever. The very next evening, September 4, 1995, Ted Turner's World Championship Wrestling launched Monday Nitro, a direct competitor to WWF's Monday Night Raw. Broadcasting live from the Mall of America in Minneapolis, the show was already making history. Suddenly, midway through the program, the crowd fell into stunned silence before erupting in disbelief, jumped from their seats in shock. No warning, no announcement, no legal buffer period between companies. Like a chess grandmaster's unexpected move, Luger's appearance changed the entire game board. The established rules of professional wrestling had been completely shattered. This wasn't just a wrestler changing employers, this was warfare. The implications reverberated throughout the industry immediately. If a major WWF star could appear on WCW television without warning, who else might jump ship? The message was clear. WCW wasn't just competing with the WWF. They were willing to shock, to disrupt, to play by new rules. In the emerging Monday Night Wars, this was the first major shot fired. For Luger personally, the move represented a career resurrection. Almost overnight, he transformed from yesterday's news to today's headline. WCW immediately positioned him in a prominent role, reuniting him with his longtime friend Sting. Their alliance became a cornerstone of WCW programming during a crucial transition period for the company. When the New World Order storyline began in 1996, with Hulk Hogan's shocking heel turn and alliance with outsiders Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, Luger occupied a fascinating middle ground. Unlike most WCW wrestlers who either fought against the NWO or eventually joined them, Luger maintained an ambiguous position. He wasn't fully trusted by WCW loyalists, yet he fought against the NWO invasion. This unique positioning kept fans guessing about his true allegiances, adding layers to a character that had often been criticized for being one-dimensional. The pinnacle of Luger's WCW return came on August 4, 1997, in Daytona Beach, Florida. On that night's episode of Monday Nitro, Luger achieved what many thought impossible. He defeated Hollywood Hogan for the WCW World Championship. As Luger applied his torture rack submission hold and Hogan submitted, the arena erupted. For a brief, shining moment, the total package had reached the absolute summit of his profession. But true to form, Luger's moment of glory proved fleeting. Just 13 days later, at Road Wild, he lost the championship back to Hogan. His reign became merely another example of Luger's inability to maintain momentum at the highest level. This period from 1995 to 1997 represented Luger's final run as a genuine main event performer. While he would remain an important figure in WCW for several more years, his position gradually declined as the company's creative direction became increasingly chaotic. The cameras captured Lex Luger's professional decline, but they didn't show the true collapse happening away from the spotlight. When WCW folded in 2001, the structure holding Luger's fragile world together disappeared with it. And within just 2 years, a tragedy would shock the entire wrestling world. For nearly 20 years, Lex Luger had lived with the routine and validation of professional wrestling. The roar of the crowd, the adrenaline of competition, and the camaraderie of the locker room had been constants in his life. When Ted Turner's wrestling empire crumbled, Luger faced something more challenging than any opponent in the ring: a life without direction or purpose. "Wrestling was all I knew," Luger later admitted in interviews. "When that was gone, I felt like my identity was gone with it." In this vacuum, his relationship with Elizabeth Hewlett, known to wrestling fans as Miss Elizabeth, became his anchor. They had begun working together in WCW, where Elizabeth had been a manager and on-screen personality. After her divorce from Randy Savage, their professional connection evolved into a personal relationship as they both navigated the uncertain waters of post-WCW existence. The pressures mounted quickly. Maintaining a wrestler's physique without the structure of a major promotion pushed Luger towards substance abuse. Elizabeth, too, struggled with the adjustment. "We were like two drowning people trying to save each other," Luger would later reflect in his autobiography. Their relationship deteriorated rapidly. On April 19, 2003, police responded to their shared townhouse in Marietta, Georgia. The scene was alarming. Elizabeth with visible injuries, and Luger, once celebrated for his heroic persona, arrested for battery. The former champion who had battled Hulk Hogan was now fighting demons far more dangerous than any ring opponent. Just 3 days after the domestic violence incident, while driving through Cobb County, Luger rear-ended another vehicle. Police discovered him driving with a suspended license and carrying a handgun, This second arrest in less than a week revealed a man spiraling completely out of control. The tragic climax came on May 1st, 2003. Emergency services responded to a frantic call from their Marietta townhouse. Responders found Elizabeth unconscious. Despite their efforts, she was pronounced dead after being rushed to a nearby hospital at just 42 years old. The wrestling world reeled from the shock. Elizabeth Hewlett was the First Lady of Wrestling, a pioneering female manager whose elegance had made her beloved by fans throughout the 1980s and early 1990s. Her relationship with Randy Savage had created wrestling history, and now she was gone under devastating circumstances. "I couldn't process it," former wrestler Diamond Dallas Page said. Elizabeth was wrestling royalty. To lose her this way was unthinkable. When police searched the residence, they uncovered a disturbing reality: steroids, human growth hormone, and prescription painkillers in abundance. The toxicology report confirmed Elizabeth died from a lethal mixture of painkillers and alcohol. For Luger, the legal consequences were immediate. Prosecutors charged him with multiple felony counts for possession of controlled substances. The physique that made him famous now stood as evidence of his crimes. Combined with the earlier battery and weapons charges, Luger's fall from grace was complete. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Luger pleaded guilty. The court sentenced him to probation, mandatory drug testing, and fines. Though the legal punishment wasn't severe, the public judgment was crushing. In a heartbeat, the total package became wrestling's cautionary tale. "I hit rock bottom," Luger later said. "I lost everything that mattered. My career, Elizabeth, my reputation, all of it." The tragedy exposed professional wrestling's dark underbelly. For decades, the industry had pushed performers to maintain superhuman appearances while subjecting their bodies to constant punishment. Pain management often blurred into addiction, and when the spotlight faded, many wrestlers found themselves unprepared for regular life. Luger's dramatic fall hit especially hard because of his former status. This wasn't just any performer. This was a man who had headlined arenas across America and challenged the biggest names in wrestling. His transformation from celebrated athlete to convicted felon revealed the human cost behind the glitz and spectacle of professional wrestling. The life of a professional wrestler is defined by physical prowess. But what happens when that physical ability is suddenly stripped away? For Lex Luger, the man once marketed as the total package, the answer would come in the most unexpected and devastating way imaginable. While many assumed Luger's story had reached its tragic final chapter after his legal troubles following Elizabeth's death, fate had an even crueler twist waiting. His problems continued to mount when, in 2005, he was arrested for violating probation by traveling outside the United States for a wrestling appearance. It seemed like the former champion couldn't stay out of trouble, his judgment as compromised as his reputation. On October 19, 2007, everything changed. A Titan suddenly grounded, Luger found himself on a domestic flight when he felt a strange sensation. Within moments, the man who once body-slammed 500-pound Yokozuna couldn't move his arms or legs. A stroke in his spinal cord had transformed one of wrestling's most physically impressive specimens into someone completely dependent on others. A crushing blow to a man whose identity had been built on physical dominance. Doctors delivered a grim prognosis, offering no guarantees he would ever walk again. For nearly a month, Luger remained immobile, trapped in the prison of his own body. The psychological impact hit harder than any wrestling move he'd ever endured. The former champion now waged an internal battle more challenging than any match. "When you're laying there and you can't move, you have a lot of time to think," Luger reflected in later interviews. In that stillness, forced to confront his mortality and limitations, something profound began to take shape. Each small victory in rehabilitation, moving a finger, lifting an arm, required marathon effort from a man who once performed feats of strength effortlessly. By June 2008, after months of grueling therapy, Luger achieved what many considered impossible. He stood with assistance and began taking tentative steps with a walker. Progress continued slowly but steadily. By 2010, he was walking more comfortably and even driving again, though the recovery remained incomplete. His body, once a sculpted marvel at 275 pounds of muscle, transformed dramatically, shrinking significantly as his condition changed. But as his physical presence diminished, something else within him grew stronger. During these darkest hours, Luger experienced a spiritual awakening that overshadowed any championship he'd ever won. The wrestler who had measured his worth in titles and physique discovered something more enduring. Becoming a born-again Christian gave Luger purpose beyond his physical abilities. "I found my identity," he explained. "For so long, I was just a body. Now I understand there's more to life than that." The humbling reality of dependency transformed a man celebrated for his independence and strength. Simple tasks requiring assistance became profound lessons for someone who embodied self-sufficiency in the ring. This vulnerability opened Luger to connections and perspectives impossible during his years of apparent invincibility. By 2021, Luger became fully dependent on a wheelchair for mobility. Yet rather than surrendering to bitterness, he found ways to give his experience meaning. The man whose muscular frame once commanded attention now drew people in with his spirit and message. Perhaps the most remarkable chapter in Luger's transformation came when WWE, the company whose opportunities he had squandered years earlier, invited him to participate in their wellness program. The former star now spoke candidly to current wrestlers about substance abuse dangers and preparing for life after the spotlight fades. He began making occasional appearances at wrestling conventions and WWE programming, no longer as a performer, but as a living testimony to resilience. The man who seemed destined to be remembered for failures and Elizabeth's tragic death had somehow rewritten his legacy into something meaningful. When asked about his condition, Luger acknowledges challenges without self-pity. Instead, he expresses gratitude for his journey and the opportunity to help others avoid similar pitfalls. The humility reveals how completely the total package has been unwrapped, showing the human being beneath the muscular facade, a transformation more impressive than any championship victory. The wrestling business Luger entered in 1985 barely resembles the one that now references his story in wellness seminars. When a man built to be the perfect physical specimen becomes the poster child for an industry's darkest tendencies, we're forced to ask, did Lex Luger fail wrestling, or did wrestling fail him? Few wrestling careers divide historians and fans quite like Lex Luger's. For every argument that he squandered his potential, there's a counterpoint that he was pushed beyond his capabilities by promoters mesmerized by his physique. The truth likely falls somewhere in the middle. A talented athlete thrust into main event positions perhaps faster than his skills warranted, yet one who delivered memorable moments across multiple wrestling eras. Luger's journey through professional wrestling serves as a living timeline of the business itself. He began in the territory days when regional promotions dominated, rose to prominence during the national expansion, became a key player in the Monday Night Wars, and now serves as a voice of caution in today's wellness-focused era. Like a wrestler who transitions from villain to hero, the industry itself transformed dramatically during Luger's tenure. What makes Luger's legacy particularly fascinating is how it reflects wrestling's changing values. When he debuted, the business prized larger-than-life physiques above all else. Promoters saw dollar signs in his muscular frame, positioning him alongside technical masters despite his limited experience. As wrestling evolved through the 1990s toward emphasizing in-ring performance, Luger became emblematic of a fading era. A superstar whose look overshadowed his wrestling ability in an industry increasingly valuing technical skill. The wrestling business transformed profoundly while Luger occupied the spotlight. An industry with virtually no health safeguards evolved, partly in response to tragedies involving performers like Luger, into one with comprehensive wellness policies. Today's protocols around substance testing, mental health resources, and rehabilitation support exist because the business learned harsh lessons through those who struggled without safety nets. Luger's influence on current wrestlers reveals a striking duality. Some draw inspiration from his once impressive physique, while many more view his substance abuse struggles as a powerful warning. He stands as both beacon and cautionary tale, a physical specimen who reached wrestling's heights only to discover the foundations were unstable. His career resembles wrestling itself, initially focused on spectacle and surface appeal before evolving towards something more substantive. Perhaps most remarkable about Luger's story is his unexpected final chapter. The man once marketed as physically perfect now navigates life with significant limitations, yet has found purpose that eluded him during his championship reigns. In recent interviews, Luger reflects on this transformation. "The important thing is facing your demons and striving for redemption," he explains. This journey from superstar to cautionary tale to mentor represents wrestling's own evolution writ small. The impact of Luger's experiences on WWE's current approach to performer wellness remains profound. His participation in wellness programs allows today's wrestlers to hear firsthand about fame's pitfalls from someone who experienced both glory and despair. His message resonates because it comes from hard-earned wisdom rather than judgment, making him uniquely positioned to influence the next generation of performers. Luger's journey ultimately reveals that wrestling's true measure of success extends far beyond championships or physical attributes. For decades, the business promoted superficial qualities, titles, physiques, entrance spectacles, as greatness. Luger possessed all these yet found himself empty. The transformation of Lawrence Pfohl from the total package to a man seeking deeper meaning offers perhaps the most valuable lesson for today's performers: that personal fulfillment transcends professional accolades. The wrestling industry seems to have learned this lesson alongside Luger. Modern policies acknowledge that performers are human beings first, athletes second, and characters third, a dramatic reversal from when Luger rose to prominence. His story perfectly maps wrestling's evolution from an era valuing appearance above wellness to one recognizing the human cost of such misplaced priorities, setting the stage for our final analysis of his complex legacy. And so we come to the end of Lex Luger's remarkable journey. The man who once embodied the total package teaches us that true strength isn't measured in championships or physique. In recent interviews, Luger reflects, "I've learned that life is about helping others and being of service, and that's what I try to do every day." This perspective represents something far more valuable than any title he ever held. The wrestler who once flexed in mirrors now looks outward, creating a documentary about his life to help others avoid similar pitfalls. His transformation from celebrated athlete to humbled servant reveals wrestling's untaught lesson. That genuine fulfillment comes not from adoration, but from serving others. The total package's greatest victory wasn't in the ring, but in discovering his true purpose when the spotlight faded. Like and subscribe for 100 years of luck. Until next time.